it's a training about observing the world and being awake and aware to the world so that you can find the words to recreate that sense of being alive in the world. Memory ensures that things don't just happen and then disappear without trace. It makes a record, however unreliable, of what has happened to us, of our experience of being in the world, and so provides us with the raw material of creativity. To me, memory is the source of all creativity, whether you're writing music or writing a novel or whatever, there's still memory. I think that actually deciding that writing is not your kind of spare time activity, that it is the center of your life, I think is crucial to being able to keep on doing it, because everything else just about is easier. But I think creativity doesn't work that way. It's got its own secret pathways.
Stories and Stanza is a podcast exploring creativity, resilience, and the transformative power of human stories. Through our two series, Between the Lines with creators and Fail With Me focusing on wellness and life's challenges, we bring you authentic conversations with inspiring voices from around the world. If you are drawn to meaningful dialogue that both comforts and challenges, follow us on YouTube or any podcast platform. Hi Patty, good afternoon and welcome to Stories and Stanza. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks, Opera. Thank you for asking me.
I'm looking forward to talking about your creative journey and especially the new book that you've published. So, for our listeners, could you give a brief introduction?
Okay. My name is Patty Miller, and I was born on Wiradjuri land. And I think ever since I learned to read, I wanted to be a writer because that seemed like the most wonderful thing possible to be, to write and have people enjoy your stories. And so I attended UTS, the University in Sydney, to do a writing course and was already writing stories myself then. But gradually over time, I started being more interested in nonfiction. I love fiction and have written fiction, had a novel published, but I became more and more interested in the directness, or the seeming directness anyway, of nonfiction. So I've started working in that area and have published 6 books, I think, of creative nonfiction, as well as the novel and as well as the writing books, which are covering at first just memoir, but then I extended it out into creative nonfiction. So I've pretty much been, I have really been a writer all my life and will continue to write. And also I have been teaching creative writing, and since 1991, I have focused on teaching memoir and creative nonfiction. So that's a bit of a summary of my writing journey, I guess.
Thank you so much. I keep getting asked this question: do I know any writers who teaches writing as well? Next time I get those questions, I'm sure I'd be able to point them to your direction. In my podcast, I'm trying to create a community feeling and awareness among writers and creators. Every time I speak to a writer, it enriches my experience and it shows me a way to be a better writer. And then it also gives the writers a place to amplify their voice. So in both
Yes.
ways, it's a very fulfilling journey. So let's talk about writing true stories that you shared with me. And I really love that the way you have structured it. But for our audience, can you tell us a little bit about the book? And this is the second edition as well. So, what has.
Okay, no, thank you for that. And I do think it's so important, that connection between writers, the way we speak to each other across time and across cultures and geography. It just brings us together as if we were one, I think. So I think it's really important what you're doing. So with this book, it's really writing true stories. It really grew out of the workshops that I started teaching at Varuna Writers House about 35 years ago, when I noticed that there were a lot of people in my university classes who wanted to learn how to write their own story. So I thought I would create a course exactly for them and started teaching it at Varuna. And that was the beginning of it. I never looked back from there. that people wanted to do it, and I became more and more interested in it. So after a few years, I realized that I was getting tired of standing at the photocopier, sort of photocopying bits and pieces for the class. And I thought, I need a book. And then I thought, I know what, I'll write the book. So that's where it started. It was called Writing Your Life at first, the very first one. And then it was expanded into the memoir book. And then I wrote another edition of Writing Your Life. And then I thought, actually, it's much bigger than that now. It's actually expanded in the whole area of nonfiction, where you're not just writing about your own life, but you're writing about some other particular historical or scientific or psychological or social or cultural or political story. So I expanded the book out and changed it into Writing True Stories. And that was in 2017. But, that was 7 years ago. And I've been learning and writing and teaching myself during that time. And I thought there's new areas that I wanted to go into. So I expanded it. So the basic structure of it is like a course, really, where you start with the fundamentals of being able to write in a rich and detailed and sensory way, so that and really it's a training about observing the world and being awake and aware to the world, so that you can find the words to recreate that sense of being alive in the world. Basic things like creating a scene, also about finding a voice. How do you find the right voice to write it in? And also what point of view you write it from, the teenager you were or from the older person you are now. And then structure, how to put it together so that it's not just a list of I did this and then I did that. And then it expanded out into areas like the difficulties of truth-telling. Are you going to lose all your friends and family if you tell this story? And also, what about self-indulgence? Is it going to sound, like that you're completely self-absorbed? Or issues like the borderlands. How many things can you change in the details before it becomes fiction? So also then I wanted to look at different genres of creative nonfiction, like writing true crime, for example, or environmental writing, or, writing about a particular sort of political issue that concerns you. Like for me, I wrote The Mind of a Thief, which was about connection to country and Indigenous connection to country. So there's chapters on different genres within creative nonfiction. So it just became and still becomes a bigger and bigger area for me. I don't think, one can ever get to the end of it, actually.
That is very right. In my show, I have spoken with a few writers who have written their memoir, and they have approached it from so many perspectives. So some people dealt with loss, someone dealt with health challenges, and someone wanted to explore, be adventurous. So all the different angles that they have taken, that's really amazing. And which is what I noticed when I started reading your book, that there's not one path, the memoirs. Is it okay for you to read something from your book?
Read a little bit, just a minute or two. I thought maybe I'd read about memory, if that's all right, because I think that's the sort of underlying and crazy sort of master of memoir is memory itself. And I find it very fascinating. So I'll read about a page and a half from Memory. Memory is the mother of creativity. Memory, that curiously imaginative recorder, is the main source for life writers. Memory ensures that things don't just happen and then disappear without trace. It makes a record, however unreliable, of what has happened to us, of our experience of being in the world, and so provides us with the raw material of creativity. In Greek mythology, Mnemosyne, or memory, is the mother of all the muses, the creative spirits of humankind. In other words, memory is the mother of creativity. It is also the mother of thought and of learning. Aristotle said we could not think without being able to recollect our experiences, and certainly without reflection on what has happened, there could be no development of ideas. A sense of self is largely made up of memory, Without memory of events, relationships, or knowledge, it seems impossible to construct a sense of self, and certainly impossible to write more than a few disjointed words. It's also perhaps our only chance at immortality, to live in other people's minds. Understanding the nature and function of memory goes to the heart of who we are as human beings. As French writer Guy de Maupassant said, our memory is a more perfect world than the universe. It gives back life to those who no longer exist. Your memory has stored experiences in imaginative patterns. Go into the writing via this store of memory, and you are entering into the imaginative, creative part of your mind. From there, you are much more likely to write with vividness and clarity. There, each memory can trigger another, especially if you write it down. Even people who are sure they have no recollection of a particular period or person are astonished and delighted to find memories flooding back.
I am reading a book at the moment, which is more of a psychiatrist viewpoint on how memories are made, and that belief has changed over time, how we started relating to different senses. And she has given a beautiful account. Sometimes she's sharing stories, and sometimes she's sharing the justification, the scientific part and the emotional part. And that
Sure.
has come out beautifully in that book. Many people approach this based on what they can remember, and there are different types of memories. There are memories of different types of senses, and channeling that into words is very difficult. To give one a flavor of your own memory through your words, that's beautifully creative. Even if we call it nonfiction, that there's enough room for creativity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, to me, memory is the source of all creativity, whether you're writing music or writing a novel or whatever, there's still memory. And I think, as you say, the science of memory is fascinating. But as a writer, knowing that every memory is laid down with a sense component means that we can use that as a writer by using the senses to activate particular memories so that they can come back to us. So that's one of the exercises that I like doing, is ones that will activate the memories, and people will write things that they hadn't thought of for 30 years or 50 years or however long it's been. So, but it's not just that, it's also because you're going back to the original memory, which some people call Proustian memory. It is much more vivid and alive. It's not that kind of recorded kind of memory that we have on the top of our brains. It's actually very deep memory. So it's a matter too of questioning that, as a writer, and seeing, of course, memory changes over time, and every time we remember something, we change it. So I think it's very fascinating for every writer to look at memory, and even, in very significant fiction writers like Proust have used memory as the core of what they're doing.
As a writer, I get very curious to hear from other writers about their discipline and their research that gets the shape of a book. You have been teaching for such a long time, and you have put all your experience into this book. Can you share something about what should be the discipline of writing, especially if we are focusing on memoirs and in this area of nonfiction?
Yes, I think that's important actually, because it doesn't happen by magic. I think, that writing can be much kind of mythologized, really, as if, sitting in a garage and things come flowing down to you. But we all live in a real world, and we mostly have to earn a living, and not always through our writing, now depending on the kind of writing that we're doing. So I think, you need to be able to structure your time so that you've actually got time to write, because otherwise your other responsibilities can take it over, either, looking after a house or household or children or work, all those things can impinge on your time. So I've had a long practice of putting writing first, that even when I had small children, and they would be at daycare and I would get the writing done while they were away, or I would make sure that I could write at a time when I had no other things to think about. So I think preparing your mind to be focused, I think, is really important, and having a very regular writing time. I think to me, that is very important, that I actually start like I was in an office, I sit down, start work at 9 o'clock, and I keep working through till about 2 o'clock. That's when I'm working on a book. And I do a lot of research for my writing, but I don't tend to do it beforehand because I think that you end up with lots of material and not really know how to go into it, what to do with it. So I research as I go. So all day long, I'm going backwards and forwards from my writing to checking information, checking facts, finding out things. I think most of the books that I have written are probably on the borderland between memoir and creative nonfiction. So there's a lot of research, like the one I mentioned, The Mind of a Thief, has a lot of research about a native title claim in my hometown. And another one I did, Ransacking Paris, which has a lot about French memoirs. So there's a lot of research about that in that book. And the one that I'm working on at the moment has a lot of research about both Virginia Woolf and Annie Ernaux, two incredibly important writers. And what is interesting about that to me is what you said before about connecting to other writers, because really that's what inspired me to write it, was my feeling of connection to those kinds of writing. Those kinds of writers have really kind of inspired me, I guess. But I think that actually deciding that writing is not your kind of spare time activity, that it is the center of your life, I think is crucial to being able to keep on doing it, because everything else just about is easier. It's easier to go to work. It's easier to clean the house. It's easier to go and see your friends. So I think, writing's the hardest thing you will ever do, probably. So the brain has a natural tendency to do what's easiest. That's what the psychology researchers show, that we like doing what's easiest. That's just the way we're made. So I think it does really take discipline to get yourself into a regular rhythm of writing.
When you write, and in that writing process, since we are talking about writing discipline, do you face like burnouts or like a dry period or writer's block and such things? Then how do you tackle such a condition?
I don't know that I've actually had exactly writer's block as such. I mean, sometimes it's taken me a while to find out what I want to write, but I think I'm used to that process because I've been doing it for a long time. So I know forcing the issue won't work. Like normally in the way that we're brought up and schooled, we are, told to, have strength of will and just sit down and think it through properly. But I think creativity doesn't work that way. It's got its own secret pathways. So I think the thing to do is to actually go sideways into it by nourishing yourself, going to experience something creative, perhaps an art exhibition or a film or something like that. But also for me personally, walking. I think walking actually, I do long distance walking, and walking is one of those processes which actually helps calm the busy, agitated, everyday mind and lets the kind of creativity of diverse thinking kind of rise. So that's why you get all your best ideas when you're walking. So find out what it is that lets you sidestep the writer's block or the difficulty in getting going, and don't kind of try and force it head on, because I've found it doesn't work. I will try, say 10 beginnings, but I won't panic. I think I used to panic when I was younger, but now I think, okay, that didn't work. Cross it out, start again, cross it out, start again. That's okay. I don't get too anguished about it. And because I think the more stressed you get about it, the more difficult it becomes as well. So I've kind of learned over the years to not pressurize myself, but to sit down and, that's a kind of balance between being disciplined and sitting down to do the work, but not being hard on yourself, being thinking, okay, maybe I would be better off this morning reading, a chapter from Annie Ernaux or listening to a podcast on Virginia Woolf or something like that. So, find a way of staying disciplined, but not being too hard on yourself, I think.
I have seen a reflection of what you said in my life as well. Read some books a long time ago, and that suggested that if you're facing a writer's block, you have to force yourself to write. And then I realized that it's not working. And I had these dry periods in writing, and I stopped writing completely. And I found that the words came back to me. So that
Ah,
is only natural for the creative spirit to come back. And I don't have to write all the time, or I don't have to write from suffering or discomfort. So that has gradually come to me. So coming back to the book, is it the second edition? Is it published already?
oh, yes. Right. Yeah. Yes.
Ah,
Yes. I'll just show it to you. The listeners can't see it, but
yeah.
yes, it came out at the beginning of June. So it's been out for 4 weeks now. So, and it's published by Routledge, which is an English multinational, mostly academic publisher, but this is not an academic book. It's a book that anybody can use. I know that it's set at a number of universities around the world, but it's very much written from the point of view of talking to my students, the people I know, the people I've met over the last 35 years. They have been my teachers in a sense, in that they have taught me, what they need to know, how to approach it. So the way that I've written it is so that anybody who's interested in writing, whether you're only just starting out or you've been writing for a while, you can pick it up and you can follow it. And it's organized in a developmental way so that you can start at the beginning and work your way through, but you can also open it wherever you're up to, whatever issue you want to look at. So you can open it on structure, or you could open it on finding your voice or bringing it to life with scenes, or you could go over to the genres towards the back and look at crime or journalism or diaries and journals. So it's kind of organized in a way that is very accessible to anyone because, because I've been teaching it for such a long time, I know what people who are beginning need, and I also know what you need later on. But it's not just based on the classes, it's based on my own writing experience. I think it's not at all theoretical. I do have a couple of writing degrees, but I don't, even though that informs some of my attitudes and approaches, I teach from a very practical point of view, really from the art and craft of writing, I think.
You said that your students helped you write this book. And can you share like some of your observations, as in queries that people brought to you, or you thought that we don't have enough guidance in that space and I'm going to focus that in the book?
Well, I think that one of the sort of issues really, and it's been an issue for me as well, is people knowing what perspective to write their story from and how to find their voice. Because, the general advice, especially with memoir, is to write the way you speak. But in fact, we speak in all different kinds of ways according to the situation. The voice that we use and the attitude we use with a child is very different to the one that we use with our superior at the office, or the one that we use with the woman in the chemist, or the one that we use with our lover. And we all know what voice to use in what situation. And if we use the wrong voice, it would be very weird. But But so that's one of the things that I sort of talk about and that students have sort of asked me about, it's feeling uncomfortable because they're trying to write in a literary voice, you know, and it becomes a little bit kind of, I suppose, stagey, and trying to sound impressive. So it's trying to find that voice which feels authentic for that person. But the other way that students have, I think, have helped is that I actually use various extracts from some of the writing classes to illustrate the exercises, because the book is arranged so that there's a discussion of the topic, and then there's a reading, and there's exercises, and there's also a reading from a published author like, say, some of the best like Joan Didion or Zadie Smith or Robert Macfarlane, worldwide sort of nonfiction writers, but also, an extract from a student of mine, to illustrate the point. So I love that, to show that, anyone can do these exercises and you can come up with a really kind of vivid piece of writing without having to feel too pressurized about it, I guess.
Yes, sometimes the writing itself can be very overwhelming when someone is getting started and they need that guidance, they need that direction. They think that I have so much memory, but sequencing that and challenging that into the chapters, that's where how you have given the directions in the book, it's really amazing. I would
Thank
look
you.
forward to get the print edition as well, because I like to read the books in print.
Oh, me too. No, I much prefer it in paper. I think that they have taken a long while because if you go through the website, I think it comes from England. That's the problem. But if you just order it normally, it would arrive, from Australia, I think.
Yeah.
But this book, I mean, it's written in a way that it can be used across the English speaking world anyway, because it's got kind of examples and sort of ideas which are part of kind of the English speaking and English writing literary world in it. But I don't think it's daunting at all. I think I hope that people come to it and can pick it up and can feel encouraged to make a start and to keep writing.
Yes, absolutely. We are coming towards the end of our discussion. I wanted to cover one last thing, is if you could share what do you teach and how can people enroll in any of your classes, that would be good for the listeners.
Yes. Well, I teach mostly it's memoir and sometimes focusing on creative nonfiction, but I'm not doing as many courses as I have done. Just this year, I've started to cut down a bit, but I've just finished a course for the Faber Academy, and that's the Faber Academy in Sydney, and that is a long course, but it has been on Zoom this year, so people can do it from all over Australia. So that's one place to look, is the Faber Academy. I also teach for the London Faber Academy. So if you have any listeners in England, then I'm doing one in September in London. So you just look at the Faber Academy for London. And I do nearly every year, I do a workshop, a memoir workshop in Paris as well. So if anyone feels like giving themselves a really lovely treat, the next one will be next year in October next year. And you can find out about that through Better Read Bookshop, which is in Sydney. But I've been doing those workshops, I think, since 2005, and people from all over Australia and other countries too do that workshop. It's an intensive where you do it every day. But other than that, I have a couple of online workshops myself, correspondence courses, which follow the book pretty much, but you get individual input on each of your chapters as you go. And some people really like that. Some people like to have input on the chapters as they go. Other people are happy to work alone and then get some input at the end. So it depends on the way that you like to work. But you can look at my website, which is, if you put lifestories.com.au, you will find my website, and you can enroll in a course where you have an individual tutor who works with you. Or you can just email me, and if you want to talk about your writing for an hour, I do that as well. I think sometimes all you need to do is talk about it, So I kind of offer that service as well, because often in talking about it with somebody else, you can come up with the solutions yourself, I find.
Thank you so much. I will put those links in the episode description for anyone who is listening to Stories in Stanza can find some pointers to reach out to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
And thank you very much, Oprah. It's been wonderful. You've asked very useful and insightful questions. Thank you.